The battlefield was a scene of chaos. Smoke twisted in the cold wind, carrying with it the acrid stench of burnt metal and alien blood. Debris from destroyed vehicles and shattered weapons littered the ground. Elias Rowe, a human captain, crouched behind a fallen piece of armor, his chest heaving from exhaustion. His squad had been decimated in the clash against Queen Zalara's forces, the alien queen whose name alone struck fear into the hearts of humanity. Yet here, in the middle of this wasteland, Elias' attention was drawn to a figure lying unmoving some 30 meters away. It was her, Queen Zalara, the enemy leader, the architect of countless human deaths. Her sleek armor was dented and scorched, and her breathing was ragged. Her normally imperious posture had crumpled into something fragile, almost human. Elias' first instinct was disbelief. Could he really consider approaching her? The queen was a threat unlike any other. Every soldier he had ever trained with had been taught to kill her on sight. Yet looking at her now, injured, trembling, and alone, Elias felt something stir inside him, something he could not ignore. Orders ran through his mind. Do not engage unless necessary. Return to base. Evacuate survivors. Leave nothing to chance. But Elias' instincts went beyond orders. The human heart, stubborn and unpredictable, pushed him forward. He glanced over the battlefield. No other survivors were in sight. The alien forces had retreated, leaving their queen behind. Elias moved carefully, every muscle tense, every sense alert. One misstep could be fatal, both from hidden alien scouts and from the environment itself. The ground was unstable, littered with jagged metal and the remnants of burned vehicles. But he ignored the pain in his legs, the burning in his lungs. Step by step, he closed the distance. Queen Zalara's eyes opened as he neared. They were the eyes of a predator, sharp and calculating, yet now clouded with pain and fear. Elias stopped a few meters away and raised his hand slightly, a gesture of peace, though he knew it might mean nothing. "Do you intend to kill me?" Her voice was cold but faint. "No," Elias replied firmly. "I'm going to help you. You're injured and you can't move." Her gaze narrowed, disbelief flashing across her face. You are human. You have no reason to spare me." Elias shook his head. "I don't fight for hatred. I fight for survival, for life. Killing someone who can't defend themselves is not survival, it's murder." The queen's lips twitched as if to form words, but none came. She had never experienced such mercy. To her species, weakness was met with death. And yet here was this human offering help instead of vengeance. Elias knelt beside her, checking her wounds. She had deep gashes across her legs and arms, burns along her sides, and one arm hung awkwardly. His hands worked quickly, stabilizing her as best he could with the limited supplies he carried. Every touch, every movement was deliberate. He could feel her tension, the way she braced for pain or betrayal, but he did not falter. "I need to move you," Elias said quietly. "The battlefield isn't safe. We need to get to a medical outpost." The queen's brow furrowed. "Why would you risk yourself for me?" "I am your enemy." Elias' jaw tightened. "Because it's the right thing to do. Survival isn't just about killing the strongest, it's about preserving life where you can." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slightly. Elias carefully lifted her into his arms. She was surprisingly heavy, far heavier than any human could be, but he adjusted his grip and began the long journey. Every step was agony. His legs screamed, his arms burned, but he did not stop. 30 miles of rough terrain lay before him, and he would carry her every step if necessary. As they moved, the queen spoke in broken words, trying to mask both her pain and her pride. "Do humans always act so honorably?" Elias shook his head. "No, but some do. And some survive because they do." Her gaze softened, though she did not admit it aloud. She had lived her life surrounded by power, by armies, by fear. She had never encountered a being willing to risk everything for her life without expectation. And yet here he was, human, fragile, but relentless. The journey was grueling. The terrain shifted from jagged metal to rocky ground to streams of water heated by steam from broken pipes. Elias slipped once, almost dropping her, but he recovered, gripping her tightly against his chest. She whispered apologies, though Elias ignored them. Her voice was weak, filled with disbelief that a human would endure so much for her. They encountered obstacles along the way, small predators drawn by the smell of blood, pockets of unstable terrain, and remnants of alien war machines that could explode at any moment. Elias navigated each one with a combination of skill, luck, and stubborn determination. At one point, a collapsing bridge threatened to end both their lives, but Elias' quick thinking and raw strength allowed them to cross safely. Hours turned into a full day. Elias' body ached beyond description, but he refused to let fatigue or pain stop him. Every time his legs wobbled, he reminded himself of why he carried her, not as a queen, not as a symbol, but as a life that deserved saving. Queen Zalara remained quiet for long stretches, her eyes closed, her head resting against his chest. Occasionally, she would murmur questions about humans, about why he was doing this, about what drove a species so small and fragile to persist against odds that seemed impossible. Elias answered in simple words, about hope, about honor, about perseverance. His explanations were not grand, not heroic. They were human, straightforward, and sincere. As night fell, the temperature dropped, and Elias built a small makeshift shelter for them beside a ruined structure. He tended to her wounds again, using what little supplies he had to clean cuts and stabilize her. She watched him in silence, studying his hands, his determination, the way he refused to complain despite the clear suffering etched on his face. "You are unlike anyone I have known," she whispered. Elias gave a faint smile, exhaustion in every line of his face. "Humans aren't perfect, but we endure. That's what matters." In that moment, the queen realized something profound. Her empire, her armies, her power, they were impressive, but they lacked something her people had never truly valued: the quiet, unwavering determination of one human willing to endure unimaginable hardship for the sake of another life. She had never seen a being who could carry her, protect her, and refuse to yield, not for glory, not for politics, but simply because it was right. By dawn, they resumed their journey. The queen no longer questioned his motives. She silently observed, learning from his resilience, marveling at the sheer stubbornness of a human spirit. Every step was a testament to an ability her own kind often overlooked, to persist even when the world seemed against you. Finally, after what seemed like endless miles, they approached the neutral medical outpost. The walls of the facility were battered but still standing, staffed by medics willing to treat both human and alien casualties. Elias eased the queen to the ground, exhaustion threatening to pull him down with her. Staff rushed forward, stabilizing her and taking over her care. Queen Zalara's gaze met his one last time before she was whisked away. In those eyes was awe, confusion, and the faintest flicker of something else, something like respect, perhaps even gratitude. Elias only nodded, refusing to speak, unwilling to overstate his actions. He had done what any human of conscience would have done. But he did not know that his decision would echo far beyond this outpost. The alien empire, hearing of their queen's survival, erupted in confusion and anger. To them, it was unthinkable that a human could save their most powerful leader. And for Queen Zalara herself, the memory of this human soldier, his endurance, his honor, his compassion, would linger far longer than any weapon or army. As Elias finally collapsed, leaning against the cold wall of the outpost, he thought of the journey behind him. The battlefield had tested every limit of his body and spirit, yet he had endured. And though he did not yet know it, the choices he had made here, the choice to spare, to protect, to carry, would change the course of two civilizations. Humans were fragile, but their hearts were unbreakable. And in saving an enemy queen, Elias Rowe had proven it. the neutral outpost buzzed with activity. Medics hurried through narrow corridors, carrying supplies, bandaging wounds, and administering treatments to both human and alien casualties. Elia's row had collapsed in exhaustion near the entrance, the journey from the battlefield having drained every ounce of strength from his body. But despite his fatigue, he remained alert, listening for news about Queen Zalara, the enemy leader whose survival now rested entirely on the skill of the medics. Elia's mind replayed the journey over and over. Every step he had taken, every obstacle he had overcome, had been a test of endurance, courage, and determination. Yet the thought of the Queen lying in the hands of his own species, or worse, alien extremists, was almost unbearable. The fragile truce of the outpost allowed him to move freely, but he could sense the tension in the air. Every human there knew who he had saved, and every alien knew that their queen had been spared by an enemy. Whispers followed him down corridors, a mixture of admiration, confusion, and disbelief. Queen Zalara lay in a private medical chamber, her body weak but stable. Machines beeped softly around her, and medics adjusted tubes and monitors with practiced hands. Her eyes opened, and for the first time since the battle, she allowed herself to truly study Elias. He was sitting near the doorway, arms crossed, watching over her even though he had every reason to leave. His armor was torn and scorched, his uniform dusty and bloodstained, but his eyes were steady and alert, scanning the room with unyielding focus. "You returned," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I never left," Elias said simply. "I made sure you would live." Her eyes narrowed. "Why do humans have no hatred, no desire for revenge?" Elias shook his head. "We do sometimes, but I choose when it matters. Killing someone who cannot fight back is not justice, it's cruelty." Zalara's gaze lingered on him, analyzing his every feature. She had commanded armies, crushed planets, and yet she had never encountered a being who would defy logic and orders for a single act of mercy. The thought unsettled her, and yet it intrigued her as well. Perhaps there was more to humanity than her species had ever considered. Days passed. Elias remained nearby, assisting medics where he could and speaking little. He did not expect gratitude from the Queen. She was proud, disciplined, and unyielding. But he stayed because he understood something her people often overlooked. Saving a life required more than strength. It required attention, patience, and endurance. Word of the Queen's survival spread quickly. Across the galaxy, emissaries and generals demanded answers. How could the feared Queen Zalara, the symbol of the alien empire's power, survive when humans claimed the battlefield? Political tensions flared. Some within the empire saw this as a disgrace, a failure to protect their ruler, while others wondered if this human could be used as a bargaining tool. Inside the outpost, Zalara began to show signs of recovery. Her wounds were severe, but her resilience, mirrored perhaps by the human beside her, was extraordinary. She observed Elias as he worked tirelessly, assisting with supplies, monitoring her condition, and even defending the medics against impatient alien guards who sought to intervene. She had expected weakness, fear, or indifference from this human soldier. Instead, she saw determination, skill, and a peculiar form of honor that her own species rarely exhibited. "You are strange," she said one evening, her voice weak but curious. "Your kind is supposed to be fragile, yet you endure more than any warrior I have ever known." Elias paused, looking at her without expression. "Humans are fragile in body, yes, but our strength is in our will. We endure when others give up. We survive because we keep moving forward, even when the odds are impossible." Zalara considered his words. They were simple, almost naive, yet there was undeniable truth in them. Her empire measured strength in armies, weapons, and control. Humans measured strength differently, in persistence, in courage, and in the ability to act when it was easier to ignore the suffering of others. As the days turned into a week, Zalara's wounds healed and her curiosity grew. She asked questions about human culture, about Elia's motivations, about why he risked his life for someone who had caused so much death. Each answer revealed a human perspective she had never known, a perspective rooted in morality, in fairness, and in a stubborn insistence that life itself was worth protecting. Elias never tried to impress her. He spoke plainly, without embellishment, and without seeking reward or recognition. Yet every word, every action, left an impression. Zalara began to realize that the life debt she now owed this human was not just a formality. It was a bond that transcended politics, armies, and even species. One day, alien envoys arrived, demanding that Elias be handed over. To them, a human who had saved the queen's life was either a fool or a spy. The medics and outpost commanders stood firm, arguing that Elias had done nothing wrong and that harming him would violate the neutral agreement that allowed the facility to operate. The envoys were enraged, but Queen Zalara's voice, though weak, stopped them. "This human saved my life," she said, her tone authoritative despite her condition. "By the laws of my people he cannot be harmed. He owes me nothing, yet I choose to honor him. Any who defy this decree will answer to me." The room fell silent. The envoys exchanged uneasy glances. In her empire, no one challenged the queen without severe consequences, and yet this declaration shocked them. To survive, Elias needed the queen's protection. She had given it freely, an act of mercy in response to another act of mercy. Elias watched quietly, his expression unreadable. He had expected conflict, perhaps even death. But he also knew that a bond had formed between him and the queen, a bond born of endurance, courage, and a shared understanding of what it meant to survive. Over the next few weeks, Zalara recovered further. Her body regained strength, but her mind remained fascinated by Elias. She observed how he interacted with others, how he remained calm under pressure, how he refused to be intimidated by her guards or advisors. In every action, he displayed qualities her species admired but rarely understood: morality, intelligence, and unbreakable resolve. During a private conversation, Zalara finally spoke openly. "You could have left me to die," she said, her voice low. "No other human would have carried me 30 miles across that wasteland. Why did you?" Elias looked at her steadily. "Because it was the right thing to do, because someone had to make the choice. I did not carry you to earn your favor or to prove anything to your empire. I carried you because leaving you would have been wrong." Zalara's eyes softened, though she did not yet admit it aloud. For the first time in her life, she realized that a being from a species she had underestimated could possess a strength that was not measured in armies or weapons. It was a strength of character, a power of endurance, a force that demanded respect. Word of their bond spread beyond the outpost. Diplomats and spies whispered about the human who had carried the enemy queen, and the alien empire debated how to handle this unprecedented situation. Some saw it as an opportunity. If the queen owed her life to a human, perhaps humanity could be persuaded to negotiate peace. Others saw it as a danger. This human could become a symbol of defiance, a challenge to their supremacy. Meanwhile, Zalara began to take measures to protect Elias. She insisted that he remain within the outpost, shielded from political threats, while also encouraging him to train, prepare, and strengthen himself. Though he was already physically strong, she recognized that surviving the attention of her empire would require more than endurance. It would require cunning, strategy, and adaptability. Elias accepted her guidance without hesitation. He did not seek power or recognition. He sought only to survive and continue doing what he believed was right. Yet every action, every choice he made, impressed Zalara further. Her admiration grew into something deeper, though she did not yet name it. She began to see him not merely as a human who had saved her life, but as a being worthy of trust, respect, and perhaps something even more profound. One evening, as the sun set and cast long shadows across the outpost, Zalara spoke again. Your people, you endure even when it is easier to give up. You act with honor when it is easier to act in self-interest. You are remarkable, Elias Rowe. He looked at her quietly, the exhaustion of days weighing on him, yet he did not flinch. Humans survive because we choose to. We make decisions that others might avoid. It is not remarkable, it is necessary. She studied him for a long time, her mind racing. This human, so fragile in body yet so strong in spirit, had changed her understanding of what strength truly meant. She had expected to see weakness, to see fear, to see an opportunity to assert dominance. Instead, she had seen endurance, morality, and courage, the qualities that defined humanity at its finest. And in that moment, Queen Zalara made a silent vow. The life debt she owed this human was not merely a formality. It was a bond that would shape her decisions, her empire, and the fate of two species. For the first time, she understood that strength was not always measured in armies or weapons, but in the courage to carry another life through impossible odds, and the willingness to endure when all seemed lost. Elias, unaware of the depth of her contemplation, simply continued to perform his duties. He helped medics, observed security protocols, and occasionally spoke with Zalara about her recovery. Every interaction reinforced a simple truth. Humanity's greatest strength was not in firepower or dominance, but in the ability to endure, to act with honor, and to choose compassion when it was easier to ignore it. The alien empire would soon learn that this human, this seemingly ordinary soldier, was unlike anything they had ever faced. And Queen Zalara, once a symbol of fear and power, had begun to see him not just as a savior, but as something far more important, a partner in a world that had never expected humans to survive, endure, and triumph against all odds. The air in the neutral outpost was tense. Rumors of the human soldier who had carried Queen Zalara 30 miles across a battlefield spread quickly, reaching not only human ears, but also the far corners of the alien empire. Many saw Elias Rowe as a hero, others as a dangerous anomaly. For the queen herself, every day spent recovering strengthened a bond she had never expected to feel. She had witnessed his endurance, his courage, and his moral resolve, qualities that had no equivalent among her own species. Despite her weakened state, Zalara insisted on having a say in Elias' protection. She refused to allow anyone to harm him, even for the smallest political advantage. The alien envoys who arrived with orders to detain or interrogate him were met with her authority, and the medics and human officials recognized that defying the Queen's will was impossible without provoking a war that neither side wanted. Yet danger lurked beyond the outpost walls. Factions within the alien empire, angered by the Queen's survival and frustrated by the human who had spared her, began plotting. Assassination attempts were whispered in dark corridors, and spies tried to gain access to the outpost to observe Elias' routines. But the human soldier's endurance had not been tested merely on the battlefield. It would now be tested in a political arena filled with cunning, betrayal, and unseen threats. Elias remained calm, focusing on his responsibilities. He helped fortify the outpost's defenses, trained medics in basic self-defense, and familiarized himself with the Queen's medical recovery process to anticipate emergencies. He did not seek glory or recognition. For him, survival and protection were enough. Yet every move he made was observed by the Queen, who noted the combination of practical skill and unwavering calm that seemed to define him. As Zalara regained her strength, she began to accompany Elias in planning sessions, discussing both defensive strategies for the outpost and broader ideas about human resilience. She asked him questions about his people, their governments, their ways of fighting wars, and their philosophies about honor and survival. Elias answered with simple, clear explanations. He did not embellish or exaggerate. He spoke with honesty, which impressed Zalara far more than rhetoric ever could. "You humans," she said one evening as they studied maps together, "seem fragile in every way, your bodies, your lifespans, but your decisions, your will, they are stronger than anything my empire has produced." Elias shrugged. "Strength isn't just about what you can lift or how long you live. It's about what you choose to do when everything is against you. Humans survive because we make the right choice, even when it's hard." The queen studied him in silence. She realized that her life debt to Elias was not a simple formality. It was a bond that carried immense weight. He had saved her life, endured the impossible, and refused any reward or recognition. That act alone had proven that human resilience was a power her empire had underestimated, and it was a lesson she would never forget. Meanwhile, political pressure increased. Some factions within her empire demanded that Elias be handed over for trial, arguing that his influence could destabilize their society. Others warned that harming him would provoke a human response that could escalate into war. Queen Zalara's voice carried the final authority. She declared that Elias was under her protection, and any attempt to harm him would be considered treason. The declaration shocked the court. Aliens who had spent lifetimes under her rule knew that defying a queen could mean death, but few had imagined a human, a fragile, short-lived creature, could be at the center of such power. For the first time, they witnessed the queen's willingness to honor her own ethical decisions, even in the face of potential political chaos. Elias continued to prepare for threats he could not see. He studied the layouts of the outpost, reinforced barriers, and trained guards in human combat techniques that relied on speed, endurance, and clever tactics rather than sheer strength. His actions quietly demonstrated another quality humans often possessed: the ability to adapt, improvise, and use intelligence to overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. One night, the first real test arrived. A group of operatives from a rogue faction within the alien empire attempted to infiltrate the outpost. Their goal was to capture or kill Elias, believing that eliminating him would weaken the queen's influence and restore their political control. But Elias had anticipated such a move. Using a combination of stealth, traps, and strategy, he caught them before they could reach the inner chambers. He disarmed the intruders with minimal violence, demonstrating precision, patience, and human ingenuity. When the queen learned of the attempted infiltration, she observed him quietly. Elias had protected her not by brute force, but by cleverness and endurance, qualities that reflected the very essence of human strength. She realized that her life debt was not simply a bond of gratitude. It was the recognition of a superior type of resilience that her species had rarely encountered. Over the next few weeks, the queen's trust in Elias deepened. She involved him in decisions that affected both her personal safety and her empire's future. Political emissaries arrived, attempting to sway her decisions, yet she consistently deferred to Elias' judgment. His advice, always grounded in practical reasoning and moral clarity, proved remarkably effective in navigating tense negotiations and preventing unnecessary conflict. Despite the growing tension outside the outpost, moments of quiet humanity emerged. Elias and Zalara shared conversations that went beyond politics or strategy. They spoke of life, survival, and the choices that defined character. The queen learned that human strength was not always visible in battles or displays of power. It was in endurance, compassion, and the courage to act rightly even when no one was watching. Elias' humility and dedication fascinated her. He never sought recognition for his deeds, never flaunted his survival, and never claimed authority over her empire. Yet in every action, he exhibited leadership, courage, and moral clarity. Zalara began to see him as more than a protector. He was a being whose presence challenged her understanding of strength, loyalty, and even companionship. One evening, as the sun set and painted the outpost in warm hues, Zalara spoke directly. Elias Rowe, you have changed my understanding of life and strength. You have endured more than any warrior I have commanded, and yet you do so without seeking power or glory. For this, you are remarkable. Elias looked at her quietly. I did what any human with a conscience would do. I did not carry you to impress anyone, to gain favor, or to prove superiority. I carried you because leaving you behind would have been wrong. That is all. The queen studied him in silence, her mind turning over every moment since the battlefield. She realized that her admiration had grown into something deeper, a recognition of the human spirit in its purest form. She also understood that her life debt was not just a ceremonial obligation. It was a bond that could shape alliances, peace, and the future of two species. As the days passed, the rogue factions within her empire intensified their efforts, sending spies and attempting subtle manipulations. Yet Elia's presence, combined with the queen's unwavering support, neutralized every threat. His endurance, intelligence, and moral clarity proved stronger than political scheming. Every challenge, every confrontation, further solidified his reputation as a human whose qualities could not be measured by conventional power. Finally, the time came for Zalara to return to her empire's capital. She was fully recovered, her strength restored, yet her perspective had shifted. The human soldier beside her was no longer simply a protector. He was a partner, a being whose endurance and moral resolve had proven invaluable. Together, they faced the journey back, knowing that challenges awaited them not just from enemies, but from those unwilling to accept the bond between human and alien queen. During the journey, Zalara spoke openly. Elias, my people will resist the idea that a human could be more than a soldier. Yet I have seen your strength, your endurance, and your will. You have earned my respect and more than that, my trust. Elias' response was simple. I have only done what was necessary. I do not seek power or recognition. I only act when it is right. She smiled faintly. And yet, in doing what is right, you have proven to be the strongest among us all. Not because of armies, weapons, or wealth, but because of your courage, your endurance, and your heart. You have shown me what humanity truly is capable of. When they arrived at the capital, the alien empire's courtiers were stunned. A human stood beside their queen, alive, respected, and unyielding. Many questioned, others plotted, yet Zalara's authority was absolute. She presented Elias not as a subordinate, but as a partner whose qualities could no longer be ignored. The story spread quickly across both human and alien worlds. Elias Rowe, the human who had carried the enemy queen for 30 miles and survived, became a symbol of what humanity could achieve. The queen's life debt, once a formal obligation, evolved into a true partnership, marking the beginning of an unprecedented alliance between two species. The political turbulence was intense, but Elias' calm, intelligent, and morally clear decisions guided both human and alien leaders. Through endurance, courage, and the quiet power of doing what is right, he proved that humans could stand alongside the strongest beings in the galaxy. Queen Zalara, once a symbol of fear, now looked upon Elias with admiration and trust. She understood that her survival was not simply due to her own power, but because of a human who refused to abandon her. The galaxy had witnessed a truth that no weapon or fleet could teach. True strength lies not in dominance, but in courage, endurance, and the will to act rightly even when everything is against you. As the capital's stars shimmered above them, Elias stood beside the queen, quiet and unassuming, yet unmatched in spirit. The galaxy had learned that humans, though fragile, could endure, inspire, and triumph in ways that no alien could have anticipated. And for Queen Zalara, the bond with this human soldier was no longer a debt. It was a partnership, a recognition of the unbreakable strength of a human heart.